Jason Kurtz is one of the most seasoned Emmy award-winning producers in daytime television. We go way back. We've produced 4 shows together. Some of his credits include a long list of shows like the Rosie O'Donnell Show, the Queen Latifah Show, the Tony Danza Show, Harry Connick Jr., Steve Harvey, and so much more. Currently, he is the executive producer and showrunner of the Drew Barrymore Show, which happens to be the fastest growing show in daytime, which is a huge accomplishment to Jason, Drew, and their whole team. We have a lot to talk about today, so let's jump into it. Please welcome my buddy, Jason Kurtz. How are you, man?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing
I've
well.
never
Thank
had
you
an
so
intro
much.
before. That was interesting. And
You like that?
very flattering and nice and weird and yeah, so professional and well written.
Well, thank you. And so true. I'm so proud of you, man, because really like I said, we go way back. We started together, at the Rosie O'Donnell Show. I'm not sure. Was that your first show in television?
Yeah, I started there as an intern. I think right before you started.
Oh, right. Yeah. Cause I started as an intern as well. And I remember going there and just being so in awe because it was my first time ever being on a television set, ever being around, a celebrity or do anything. And I remember all I wanted to do was just impress the producers and the team just to be noticed. But it was so cool to be on that set. And, it was such a huge show at the time. When you were interning, I remember you were working in the music department, I think, when I met you. Is that right?
Yeah, I was an intern and sort of doing a lot of different stuff and then ended up in the talent department and doing a
Right.
lot with like Sue Claxton and Deirdre and then obviously eventually getting hired as Deirdre's assistant
Yeah. How was it
and
for you
sticking it
as
out for a
far?
few years.
Yeah. How was it for you as far as, seeing, because especially that show was so popular, we would have every big name in the business, and working in the talent department, you were so close to that. What was it like for you as a young person starting out in this business to be around that, to be around these iconic figures?
I don't know. That's a hard question to, because I don't remember many times being starstruck because I feel like that environment was all about professionalism and
Hmm.
setting up a place for guests to come and feel safe and not get fanned out on. So I feel like work and our jobs always came first before you even allowed yourself to get starstruck. It was very like few moments where I was like, oh wow, this is intense and insane. And I'm standing in a room with Alanis Morissette. It was the 90s, so that was like one of my few people that I was
Sure.
like, oh wow, this is wild.
Yeah. No, it's huge. And I do remember that there always was a sense of professionalism there. Like even to today when I'm working on a show, I always take that mantra of you don't ask celebrities for pictures, you don't ask them for autographs when we're in our studio or we're in our dressing room, because it is supposed to be a safe place. And I think, a lot of great lessons came out of Rosie, and maybe that's why it was such a great show. And I know, people who have come from that show, like yourself or Andy Lassner or John Redman, everyone who's now running daytime television, takes those lessons to their new shows. And I guess that's why, you guys are successful as well. But it was a great
Yeah,
place to
I don't. Well,
work.
it's funny you name John and Andy and everyone, but we learned from them. I mean, they were the ones who were sort of teaching us how to act and be and what made good segment notes and a good segment story. And it's nice that you list me with them, but I feel like they're the ones who really sort of, taught us.
Yeah. Well, no, it's very true. But I put you in that category because I'm so impressed with your career and what you've done. I mean, you've worked on so many shows. You've risen to the level of where you're an executive producer and the showrunner of Drew, which is, like I said, it's the fastest growing show in daytime right now. A huge accomplishment to you and Drew and the team. What's it like working on that show and working with Drew and your staff there? What has that experience been like?
It's been amazing. I mean, we had the unique challenge of launching in the pandemic. So I was at NBC for a bit doing development before taking the job at Drew. And then I took it and then started in March. of 2020. And then literally my first meeting with her, I was at her house and, we were going through stuff. And like a week later, the entire world shut down.
Right. Oh, wow.
And we were displaced. So we were truly like bonded together because of that experience and having to reinvent our approach and rethink everything we were doing like month after month until launch. And even that launch was like, is this going to happen? Bringing the staff on, bringing everyone on remotely, and we started live, and it was a wild ride. So I think it really bonded all of us together in such a unique way. And I mean, when we launched in September, I think there was like 6 people in the studio, and it was
Oh,
like,
wow.
it was crazy, and we had no audience, and it was just the crew and me and Drew and a handful of other people, and that was it for a very long time.
Yeah.
And the world was intense, and we tried everything, and we were sort of in an echo chamber at sorts because we had no
Yeah.
audience giving us feedback. So we're like, is this good? Is this funny? What is happening?
Right. And that's what I was about to say for people that don't know the inner workings of producing a talk show, it's a daily strip, right? You're doing a show every day of the week, and the audience brings a certain type of energy to the host, to the feel of the show. So to try to do that remotely or to try to do that with no audience, I mean, that's hard, and a testament to you guys to get through it and do it. I couldn't imagine, doing that. And I know, there are some other shows that I have friends working on too that, they would have to do remotely. I think Kelly Clarkson was doing her show from her ranch somewhere. But man, I mean, what a testament to you guys. That's got to be hard.
Yeah. And we didn't have the benefit of being an established show that had been on the air. So
True.
we were
Right.
like coming out of the gate in that forum, and it was tough, but the staff's
Man.
amazing. Drew's like the best person I could ever ask to be partnered with and to work with. I just love her to death. And we got through
Yeah.
that first year, and we got renewed, and we came out stronger with an audience in season 2, and we pushed forward and told the story that we wanted to tell, which was about connection and being in this world and bringing good news and bringing positivity as much as we possibly can. And then we got renewed for season 3, and we were challenged with coming up with a new format. So we broke from 1 hour to 2 half hours, which has had its challenges, but here we are, and it's our best year ever. And we're growing, and the ratings are supporting it. Our digital's killing it. So we're in a really good place.
Yeah, and you guys just launched the podcast, which is great. What I love about Drew is that you really get the sense. I mean, I've never met her, but you get the sense of she's just so down to earth, and she could be your buddy, right? She could be your friend, and that's what you want in a host. You want your host to connect with the viewing audience, and I think she does that brilliantly. So, well done to you guys.
Thank you.
And also, I want to talk to you too, because as you talk about all these challenges that you guys have, when you're doing a daily strip, when you're doing a show 5 days a week, things happen. You guys just came off of having a guest host the whole week. You had 50 Cent who came in to guest host. What was that like, working with him and having him guest host your show? I have to imagine that having a rapper come in who is well loved, but a different type of briefing, or how do you prep for that?
We did it because we were taping, and Drew got COVID. I think tested positive. You know how we tape Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 2 shows a day. I think it was Wednesday afternoon
Wow.
after the first show. So we were like, oh boy. So we had 15 minutes to figure out the afternoon show,
Oh
2
man.
shows, 2 half-hour shows, which we did. And we were just like, all right, we're doing A, B, and C. It's like we just had no time to think. And then Curtis was booked as a guest for the next day. So we're like, just see if he wants to host. And we obviously have Ross Matthews, who's like insanely talented. So he was able
Sure.
to take part of the day, and then 50 took the other half of the day. So there wasn't a lot of prep time, which I think was helpful. It was just like, here we go. Like, let's alter this to speak to who Curtis is and his audience, and plus our audience. And we didn't alter all that much. And like his joke was that he was Drew Barrymore that day. So he just sort of slipped in nicely, and the team came together, and we briefed him, and he felt comfortable, and he got out there and he killed it.
great. That's so cool. So
I
cool.
wish there was like
That's
a better answer to that. It was just like literally,
no, that
like that's what's
that's
exciting
brilliant.
about this job. It was like you have 15 minutes to figure this out.
Yeah, and that's the brilliance of a daytime talk show is like the teams can adapt to anything, right? Because we're just so used to fast pace and making changes on the fly. And it's cool to hear the inner workings of how that happened because, most people think, oh, wow, you have, Curtis Jackson, who is 50 Cent, who would come in, he's a rapper. He's never hosted a daytime talk show. You have to do all this briefing and change things around. But no, he came in and he's, did it. You guys were able to adjust. Very cool. Very cool. And the shows were awesome. Shows were awesome. So kudos to you guys.
Thanks.
I did want to kind of go back because usually when I do the podcast and I talk to people, I like to see the journey of how people got to their success because, I call the podcast Outstanding People with Slade Abasor. So it's just kind of hearing the journey of how you went from start to finish. So if I can go back and ask you,
You were
when
there.
did you I was there for a lot of it. But I wanted to ask you, like, when did you first get a fascination with television or wanting to work in this world? Do you remember a moment or a time when you said, man, I want to work in TV?
To be honest, I don't think I ever had that moment. I
How
was
did you fall into
I was in
the internship?
school. I was a math major
Oh,
and
really?
an
I didn't know that.
education minor. You didn't know that? Yeah.
No. Wow.
And my senior year, I went to Manhattanville, which was like 45 minutes outside the city. And I just had a realization that I didn't want to pursue math and I didn't want to pursue teaching. So I was in this place of like, what am I going to do? And I was watching Regis and Kathy Lee one morning, and they told a story about an intern. And so I went down to like our career services, and I was like, well, maybe this is something I should do. And I don't know how, I don't remember exactly, but it was like the Rosie O'Donnell Show starting. And it was like that summer that she just had started.
Oh, wow.
And I called 30 Rock, like 212-664, whatever that number was, like back in the day, and like switchboard it. And they just like passed me along, and I got through to Jen Kelly, who was the executive assistant to the EP. And I was like, I want an internship. And she was like, well, they're all in place, but one person didn't show up today. So they're like, can you come in tomorrow and interview? And like, I was like,
Wow.
okay. And I interviewed and got the job thanks to Sue Claxton, who I'm still very close to. And so it just sort of happened. It
Yeah.
never was like a choice or a passion or anything I went after. It was just like, I knew I didn't want to like be a mathematician
Like,
or a
yeah.
teacher. So it just sort of fell into place.
It's amazing how that worked. And back in the day, how easy, I wouldn't say easy, but how you can just call up and, oh, yeah, come on over. And, that doesn't really happen like that today. My story was a little bit similar too, where I was working in this rinky-dink talent agency in Times Square and really knew I needed something more. And I was going to school at NYU, and my mother had called me and said, "Oh, I'm watching Rosie O'Donnell on TV. You should call her. She looks like a nice lady." And I'm like, "Nah, it doesn't really work like that." But I called the switchboard, and same thing. I asked, if there's internships, and I think Amy, I forget her last name, but Amy, somebody was working as a receptionist, and she's like, "Oh, we're interviewing interns today. Do you want to come over?" And I was like, "Oh,
Shut
sure."
up.
Yeah. And I went over there. I met with Pat McCabe, and we hit it off.
Pat
Great.
McCabe.
Yeah.
Please tell me you stay in touch with her.
We do on Facebook. The last time I saw her was at our reunion in New York. But yeah, on Facebook, that's the great thing about social media. You could kind of
Yeah.
pop in and say hi to people and stay in
She
touch
was the
that way.
nicest.
The greatest. I mean, literally the greatest. I went in and interviewed with her, and we just laughed the whole time. We just laughed and we hit it off. And I didn't think anything of it. And at the time, I had a camera, and I remember taking back then what would be a selfie. It was one of those cameras you have to develop film. But I took a picture of us because we were laughing and having so much fun. I just wanted to remember that moment. And next thing you know, like a week later, I got a FedEx envelope saying you got the internship, and that's how I got it. But yeah, I mean, kind of like you, I just called up and was like, "Hey, can I do this?" you know, but but the funny thing
You
is, my
stayed a lot
school.
longer than I did, though, because you stayed to the end, right?
No. I left the season before the end. I went over to CBS and I did the Ananda Lewis show, which
Oh, wow.
yeah, and that's when and then 9/11 happened, and I had to get out of New York, so I wound up going to California. But yeah, it was crazy, and it's funny because I don't know, when you were doing your internship, was your school on board with it? They were like, oh yeah, great, do the even though your curriculum, you were doing math.
Yeah, they were totally were. I mean, it was a small school, liberal arts, so they were excited
Yeah,
by it.
I
They
had
still
the
called
complete.
out to have me go back and give money, but I'm like, no, thanks. I
Yeah, I
gave
had the
enough money.
complete opposite. I was at NYU at the time, and they told me I couldn't do the internship, and I was like, "What?" I was like, "This is like the biggest show in daytime television right now. I'm going to school for theater, film, television," and they're like, "No, your curriculum doesn't call for an internship. You can't do it." And I was like, "Okay." So I left. I don't know if you ever heard that story, but I wound up leaving NYU, but I had to get I had to have college credit to do the internship. So I went to New York Institute of Technology there in Manhattan. I paid for one class. I got a receipt and I went back to the show and I showed them that I was enrolled in school
I
and I
didn't
did the
know that.
internship. Yeah, but I never went back to school. I was just doing the internship. And then after my
For free, for
internship,
a $5 coupon to the
for
cafeteria.
for a $5 cafeteria coupon. Um, yeah. And then after my internship, they asked me if I was graduating because God, who was it? Chaz. Chaz was the runner, and he was either
How can you
leaving
forget?
or
Didn't everyone confuse you guys?
that's right. That's right. Yes. Uh, yeah, and he was leaving, and they were like, "Do you want a job here?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm graduating. Sure, I need a job." In the meantime, I had never gone back to school, so I was completely open. Yeah, and that's how I wound up working there.
That's a great story. I didn't know all that.
Yeah. And same. I didn't know that you were a math major. That's so cool. Um, so then
Really served
after,
me well.
well, but shows that you're smart. So after Rosie, I mean, like I said, you stayed till when did you leave, Rosie?
I don't remember exactly. Because I left to become a nanny for Judy Gold
That's right.
at
Oh, that's
some
right.
point. I don't
The
remember whether it
comedian,
was
right?
season 3 or 4. It was, yeah, a comedian who also was a writer, producer on the show.
Right.
Um, yeah, I got to the point where I was like, because I didn't know anything else other than this show and, my upbringing, which was very different. So it was like, do I want to do this? Is this the path I want to be on? Because I never really thought too much about it. So I left and went and moved in with Judy and her then partner Sharon and babysat Henry, who actually ended up working on the show for a little bit.
Wow.
He's doing really well. But yeah, so it was just like I just left and then ended up stumbling back into it when I got back because it was, I guess, like 4 months I was in Provincetown with Judy. I'd watch Henry when she did her shows, and then came back to the city after that summer and needed to work and pay my rent. So I ended up back, I think, at Queen Latifah. I think Hillary was kind enough
Yes.
to bring me back into the fold. And again, it was a job. I needed to pay my rent, and that was the reason
Yeah.
I took that job.
But this business is kind of like that, right? Where you can step out for a little bit, but it's like The Godfather, where he says they pull me back in. You always wind up back into it. It's funny
Yeah.
with Queen Latifah. That's where it's because of Queen Latifah also that I was able to hit it off with Pat and everybody over at Rosie. Prior to me going for that interview for my internship, I told you I was working at that rinky-dink talent agency. Well, the Queen Latifah Show was doing a pilot, and they had called the talent agency that I was working for. And basically, what they would do is the talent agency I worked at, they would only place extras. So it was just a talent agency for extras and background players. So for some reason, Telepictures had called that agency, and they said, "Hey, we need some people to come sit on the stage and pretend they have a horrible dating story for this Queen Latifah pilot that we're going to shoot."
Oh
And my
God, that's
boss,
awful.
yeah.
Wait, that's awful.
So so it was all like staged, right? And my boss is like, "Oh, you go to that acting school over at NYU. Can you just go do this for me?" So I was excited. I was like, great. I go over and I meet Queen Latifah and I get on stage. I give this whole monologue about some horrible dating story that I have. And Queen Latifah was supposed to like give me advice on it. But what I didn't know is that Telepictures, the same company that does Rosie, was producing this Queen Latifah show. So it was all the same people. And I don't remember what time it must have been while Rosie was on hiatus. And then when I went to do the internship interview, I recognized everybody. And I was like, oh, hey, I met you guys over at Queen Latifah. So I think that helped me out as well, because I
I
had
wish the
met
fake
everybody.
A Block story. Remember me? I had the dating monologue.
That's right. Yeah, remember me? I was the horrible dater. Remember me? But yeah. So you worked with. I thought Queen Latifah when I met her. And again, I loved Queen Latifah growing up. My brother and I were big rap fans and UTFO and Queen Latifah. So when I got to meet her, I thought that was really special and cool. And she was so sweet and nice. I don't know what your experience was on the show, but how did you like working there?
Well, that's where because I was sort of always like in the talent booking side of things, and I was there too. That's what Hillary needed on that show at the time. So I just sort of jumped into booking more. And I didn't interact with her all that much, but she seemed super lovely. I interacted with her many years later when her pilot came up at Sony because I ended up doing that. And obviously was more involved and at a higher level. So I interacted with her and she was amazing. But at that time I didn't. And Ed Glavin was the executive producer, and he's the one who sort of made me a producer because he was the one
Oh,
who's
okay.
like, a lot of the celebrities came when the celebrity bookings were coming in. A lot of the staff weren't celebrity producers, and he was just like, maybe you should do it. He's like, you think like a producer, and I was like, all right, I guess I could figure this out. And then did produce some stuff there, and then it unfortunately went away. But then Ed took over Change of Heart, and he's like, well, why don't you
That's right.
stay and do that? So then I stayed and did that for a hot second before then he left to went to Caroline Ray to take over that show and then brought me with him. So that was I wasn't at Change of Heart, I guess for like a season,
Oh
maybe
wow.
in
So you did
total.
Change
That
of Heart
was
and then Carolyn Ray.
yeah,
Man, you have so many shows on your resume. That's so cool. Like
I
you've done
know.
so
It's
much.
insane.
And what
What
was
a lot of one and dones.
yeah, well, but that's daytime television, right? The
Yeah.
beauty
Well, you
of
learn
daytime
more on
tele
those. You learn way more
yeah, and that's what I was going to
those
say.
types of shows.
It's you're doing a show, 5 days for 5 shows a week. You're pretty much guaranteed a year unless you're working on Mega Mullally, which we'll get to.
How dare you?
But but yeah, the beauty of daytime television is that once you get the job, instead of you have a lot of people that work freelance who are just kind of working on a couple of reality shows and they'll do a couple of weeks here and there. But with daytime, you get a full season. It's like almost a year's worth of work. So even if it's one season, you're still happy to be working and not
Yeah.
struggling
Until you
looking
get
for the
that pit
next
in your
job.
stomach when it's like coming to an end, you're like,
Yeah.
oh,
What am I going to
there goes
do?
my
What am I going
health
to do?
insurance. There goes a little bit of security I had. And that never goes away.
It never does, right? It never does. And then Carolyn Ray she was in the old Rosie studio. Is that right? Am I remembering that right?
Yeah, that was a trip. Yeah,
Yeah.
because it was you went.
So
Yeah, 'cause I hadn't been back, and then like everyone was new except for like two or three people. So that was wild, and that was live. So
that
that
was live.
was
Wow.
yeah, that was insane. But I loved her. We got along
Yeah.
really well, and it was I learned a
Explain
lot.
what I was about to say. Explain the difference for people listening. The difference between recording and taping a daytime talk show, 5 shows a week, and then doing it live where there's no room for error. Explain the difference with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is the headline is there's no room for error and you have to produce and plan everything down to the second. And that's what becomes challenging because you have commercial breaks that you have to hit no matter what. And they're not flexible. And so you really have to make sure that when you're planning out whatever it is the segment is, that it is 6 minutes on the nose and not 6:01, not 6:02, not 6:30, 6 minutes. And I think that was a huge challenge at Caroline because I don't remember if a large majority of that staff had done live TV before.
Mm.
So that was a challenge, but one that made me a better producer because you had
Sure.
to be exact. And you had to make sure that Caroline was prepped to be exact and that the guests were prepped to be exact. And that was
Right.
always the big challenge. But
And
obviously, when you're taping and you're not live, you have a giant safety net and you
sure.
edit and change and you can frankenbite, you can move pieces around. There's a million different things you could do to make it better.
Yeah, I enjoy the live format just because it feels more real, right? Whatever comes out comes out. You have to go with it. You have to do it. We've both seen what happens when that between live and then when you have a host who's comfortable taping and they can just kind of redo things or they can take their time or
I don't know who
make
you're
things a lot
talking about.
make things a lot longer than they have to be. But I always enjoyed the live aspect of
Yeah.
producing shows.
But
It's
honestly, there's
exciting.
strengths to both of it because obviously we're talking about Steve Harvey, who taped longer, but the benefit was that he always got to his comedy. And that
That's
was
true.
just his style. And
Right.
his style worked, for
Right.
I was on that show for 4 years in Chicago, and then for whatever the reasons behind it or whatever the path was, it worked for him. And
Yeah,
we
no,
have the power of editing.
that is true. Cause that's one thing Steve is brilliant at is, he's a comedian and he's one of the best at it. And you let him go long enough, you're going to be in stitches laughing. And if you can, edit, if you can find those right moments and get to that point, he's brilliant at what he does.
Exactly. And that's the thing. It's like every talent has a different process. And that's what I've learned through the years is, wow, it's like everyone just approaches this all so differently. And
Yeah.
some talent need to take longer to get to the comedy or get to where they're going. Others want to just get in. What are my 5 questions and get out? So
That's
those
right.
are the two extremes. And then obviously a lot of people are in the middle, but everyone has a different process. And that's, you always, as a producer, you just adapt to it and figure it out and
Yeah.
understand it and build the team and infrastructure around them that supports whatever their process is.
I think that's so true what you're saying. And I think the key to success in daytime is really understanding your host, understand their strengths, their weaknesses. Don't be afraid to really get in there and understand who your host is and then build the show around those strengths and weaknesses. And you'll find
Wait,
success.
I have to ask you a question. Sorry to interrupt
Yep.
you, but did Dimitri say that Steve called him motherfucker?
Yeah, that he did.
I thought I saw that clip and I was like, oh, I thought I was motherfucker.
Oh, did
Now
you get motherfucker too?
Did he call everyone motherfucker?
Oh, so now it's not that special.
Yeah. I was like, oh, I was the motherfucker.
Oh, well, I guess you
maybe
guys,
I was the first.
Yeah, you were the first, and you were Chicago motherfucker. He was LA motherfucker.
Exactly. Yeah, I'd walk in the room and be like, this motherfucker. What's he going to tell me now?
Yeah, that was Steve, right? Just, no holds barred, just, comes off off the top of his head.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think that you're 100% right. Understanding your host and working to their strengths is what builds success. I mean, and it's evident in what you're doing today. So you're on doing live shows with Carolyn Ray. Where does your career take you after that?
Then I stayed at I was under that Telepictures Warner Brothers, which is a huge production company and syndication, obviously, especially at that time. I was on a lot of their shows for a long time. So it was Queen Latifah, it was Change of Heart, it was Caroline Ray, then it was Sharon Osbourne's talk show in LA. And that's the first time I came out to LA.
Oh, that's right. You did Sharon Osbourne too. My God, dude, you've done everything.
I know. And then pilots, in between all that, and it's like so bizarre. And then came back to New York for Tony Danza. And that's when we were back together.
And that's when we were back together. We were reunited. That was fun. Yeah, that was a lot of fun for me.
God, that was so fun. Come on, that was one of the best. It was really so great. And, the staff was so fun.
I had this conversation where I was saying that, coming back to New York, because I had now been in LA. And where was Sharon? Was Sharon in LA or New York?
LA, yeah.
LA. So you were in LA too. So going back to New York, post 9/11, seeing the city thrive and being with one of the most iconic, TV personalities out there in his home city where he's like king of New York, it was really fun, man. And you know, I never worked with a host who was so, you know, into the staff the way Tony was, like going out with us and drinking with us and just really like wanted to be a part of what we were doing. It was really fun.
It was awesome. And also, like,
Yeah.
I was the hugest Who's the Boss fan. So, like, that
Right.
was never lost on me.
It's
I was
true,
like,
right?
this is
It's like
insane.
Tony Maselli is
Tony
standing right
Maselli.
there. Yeah, and then we did a Who's the Boss reunion show.
One of my favorite things I ever was a part of in like
Oh
my
my,
entire career.
I
That, and I
forgot
actually
about that.
told Drew the other day because she was like, what are some of the favorite things that you, I forget the context in which we were, she was like, what are some of the favorite things that you've done? And I said, honestly, and we had just filmed the ET movie reunion for our Halloween special with her and her castmates. And I said, honestly, the Who's the Boss cast reunion and this ET hour, I said, were
Oh wow.
two major highlights for me.
Honestly, I mean, like that's the beauty of our business. You get to do things that, you know, it just you bring back your childhood, right?
Yeah.
You know, I just went the other night. I don't know if you saw on my Instagram. I posted a picture. I went and saw Tony. He was here in town. He was doing his show, and so I went with my wife and some friends, and it was awesome. He's so
Isn't it the
good.
best? I've been like
Oh,
5 times.
dude, it's
I go
amazing,
with
and
Jerry
he's
all the
so
time.
good. Oh, you do? Oh man, next time you see her, you got to say hi for me. But yeah, it
Here
was
next week,
so
actually.
great, and he dances and he plays the ukulele and he sings, and you're just like, I mean, he's so talented. And then you know, of course, afterwards he came over, gave us a big hug, and it was nice
Doesn't
to
he look
catch up
good?
and see him. He looks fantastic, man.
It's
He like
insane.
it's in like I don't know, it's got to be genetics or whatever, or I don't know, but he's amazing. He looks amazing.
And he
Yeah, I
just
was
got all these like big parts too.
He
He's going
did.
to be
He's going to
on
be Sex in the City.
yeah,
What's it called? And Just Like That or something.
just like that. Yeah.
Just Like That. Yeah. Yeah. So I was really happy to see him and see how happy he was, and he's just it was amazing to see him and just the memories from that show. I mean, we I could think of so many things that we did on that show that just make me laugh. Or like I remember going to Jack LaLanne. You know Jack LaLanne, the bodybuilder guy.
Yes.
So we went to we went
What
to
was his
Jack
wife's name? Wasn't it like Elaine Lelaine or
Elaine
something like that?
Elaine. That's
Yeah.
right. The sweetest couple ever, man. But I remember I produced Jack was on our show, and it was his 80th birthday. And so Tony got invited to Jack LaLanne's 80th birthday, and I was invited as well. And so we went together, and I remember it was at the Pierre or some fancy hotel in New York, Central Park East over there, and we're all dressed up. We're have cocktails. I'm in a suit, and I'm standing there talking to Tony, and some guy comes up behind Tony and puts him in a headlock. And you know how Tony hates to be touched, and Tony didn't know who this guy was, and the guy he turns around, he like
I'm
breaks out of the
scared.
headlock.
I'm scared for this story.
Dude, you know how this is gonna end, right? So he turns around, he goes to the guy, he's like, well, what? And the guy's like, Tony, hey, it's me, remember me? And Tony's like, I don't know who the fuck you are, man. And so the guy's like, I met you on the set of Who's the Boss one time. And I'm just like, this is like, 20 years later. And I'm just like, oh my God, you expect him to remember you? So Tony chases him across the dance like he was going to kick his ass. And I had to go grab him and hold him back. And it's just how Tony, he would just, man, he had no filter. And if he didn't like you, man, he would let you know. And I just remember being all dressed up and holding Tony back from a fight. It was brilliant. It was brilliant. And then the
That
times we would
happened a
all
lot.
go to it happened a lot. It happened a lot, and the times we would go to Jake's Dilemma and we would just have thirsty
Oh,
Thursdays.
and he
Oh,
would call it Jake's mistake, and he thought it was funny every time he said it. He'd call it Jake's mistake the morning after. He'd be with us in the office, hungover. God, that was fun.
oh yeah, that was great. That was great. There was also,
Remember he
wasn't
got in
there
a
a
fight with
time?
someone on air?
That's what I was just about
Cooking
to ask you.
segment?
It was like a cooking segment, right? I
It was
think
some Italian guy that had some local restaurant.
yes, exactly. And something happened on air, and I think we were live. And
Yeah,
then
it was
Tony
it was
didn't.
out there.
Yeah, he didn't like he said something to Tony, and Tony didn't like what he said to him, and they just started arguing. Well, not they. Tony just started like putting the pressure on him, and like he was gonna like beat his ass on air. And I was like, oh
Yeah,
my
he was like,
god.
one more time, say it one more time. It was like, and they're in the kitchen with the, oh God, it was so fun.
Oh my, yeah. And here's as producers, instead of like freaking out, we're just laughing, right? Because we're like, I can't believe this is happening. We're just enjoying the show. But that's what it was.
Oh,
Every day going there and working was just, it was enjoying the show because you didn't know what was going to happen. It
yeah,
was
you really
live,
didn't.
and you didn't know, what Tony was going to say or do, but I love the guy, and he was so amazing. It was just that was a fun time. That was a really fun time.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
and then so after Tony, where do you go after? Is that when we did Megan Mullally together, or did you do something else after that?
Yeah, right? I think
Yeah, I
that's,
think that
yeah,
was.
we
I
went to
think we went
LA.
back to California,
And
right?
it's
We went.
Mullally like Sally.
That's right. Don't get it confused. Yeah. So, and that's what I was saying earlier. So usually with a talk show, you get you get a year, right? And then they let you know if you get picked up for another year, or then on and then on. But with Megan, it was the first time that Christmas came around. So we started in, I think, like July, August. And by
Right.
Christmas, I came into work one day and all of the NBC execs were there. And they're just like, we won't need you coming back anymore. The show's been canceled.
Yeah.
I'm like, what?
I remember the line, effective immediately. That was
Effective
the line that
immediately.
like, because it was like we were all just, I think it was after the New Year.
Yeah,
I
that's
think we
right.
had
And
just gotten back from the break.
that's right. That's right. And I was so angry because I went home to Florida because I was from Miami. I went home and then I came back to go to work, and they're like, we're not going to continue the show. Here's your check. And I was like, well, I could have just stayed home a little bit longer. Why bring me back?
Yeah, that was
But
a shock. Do you
yeah, and
actually,
that
do you
just
have this memory? Do you
what's that?
remember the test shows for that and how good they were?
Yeah, well, that's why I think everybody was shocked. Megan was great. The show we thought were great. Didn't we have Will Ferrell was like our first guest
Came out
on
in
the
his
show?
underwear.
Came out in
Yeah.
his. That's right. That's right. He came
Came
out
out
in his
like in his
underwear.
tidy whities. No,
Yeah,
but I remember the test shows being really good.
yeah,
And then, and I don't quote me on this, it's just my recollection. Then I remember they focus grouped them. And I feel like we got like a lot of notes and she got a lot of notes. And I feel like that really shifted
yeah.
her
Well, I remember
performance and the way we
didn't the
produced. It like put us all on edge in a way. And like the test shows were so great. And then once we got on the air, we were all kind of like screwed in the head.
right. Well, I think one of the big notes was the audience wanted to see Karen, and she wasn't going to do Karen. Right? They wanted to see Karen from Will and Grace, who, if you don't know, Megan Mullally is she played Karen on Will and Grace, and the audience wanted to see more of that quirky character. And this was the real Megan Mullally hosting a show. It wasn't Karen, and I think there were some rights or something where she couldn't do that. But yeah, man, it was crazy because I thought the shows were good. I thought we had good guests. Megan she was very sweet from what I could remember. So
Oh
yeah,
my
it
God,
was a
she's the
shocker.
nicest.
Yeah, it was a shocker to
And
come
I've
into
seen her
work.
a bunch since, and she's always so nice.
Oh yeah, I know
Yeah,
she
because
does.
she's been on
She
like
also has a show, right? I think she's a fantastic singer, from what I can remember too.
yeah, she is like Broadway
Yeah,
singer.
right, 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 right. Yeah, so that was a shame, but there were some fun moments on that show, but yeah, it just didn't last very long. And like you said, that pit in the stomach comes again. You're like, uh-oh, what am I gonna do? Um,
Yeah, and I'm
so
living like Kevin and I were like, now we're in LA. He went and worked at The Bachelor, so it was just like I had nothing, and it was like a dorm room. So where I don't know if you ever came to the place. So Denise Burt, who's a talent
mhm.
booker, who's in our circle, right? She had an apartment. I had an apartment with Kevin on the same floor in the same building. And then Christine Composto had one down the hall.
Oh
So we
wow.
had the three of us had apartments in the same building on the same floor. It was it was like a dorm. It was insane.
Oh man.
And then when
And
we
now,
were all
and
like thrust out into unemployment,
yeah, I'm about to say now everyone's unemployed.
yeah,
Oh man.
it was
So
wild.
what do you? So Kevin's doing he's doing The Bachelor. What did you wind up doing next?
Hillary Estee McLaughlin again um, brought me into telepictures, but this time she brought me into development, and I had an overall development
Oh,
deal. So I was
nice.
doing a lot of different stuff, and that's when I did Bonnie Hunt's pilot, and then her series, and that was sort of the main thing that I did during that time. And that's when I
Got it.
learned how boring development is.
Yeah, it's like yeah, you're being on the front lines and then thrown into an administrative position, and you're just like, I miss being on the front lines. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. And
did
then
a
so
whole
you
lot of
did,
nothing.
yeah, yeah. So Bonnie Hunt, and then was Nate Berkus somewhere in that realm as well?
Yeah, where
He
was
was,
that? That
yeah.
was in there somewhere. That I think that's what brought me. Corinne Nelson brought me in to help. She took over the show towards the end of its first season. Then I came, she was like, I need help. So I came out for like 2 months or a month and a half,
Mhm.
never expected to stay. And I was just like, yeah, whatever you need. And just sort of jumped in and got them to the end. And then she's like, you have to stay next year. So
Oh wow.
then she ended up hiring me and Kevin. And we stayed for season two. And that brought us back to New York at that time.
How good of a feeling is that when you're unemployed, like you're I wouldn't say not really unemployed. Well, I guess you are unemployed. When you lose it, you're working on a great show and then you lose that, and then the next you're wondering where is that next one going to come, and then it does. Like how good is that feeling?
Yeah, because you're like, I have health insurance again and a paycheck and I can
Yeah.
pay my rent. Of course, it's a good feeling.
Yeah, yeah, it's oh my God. I really do. I hate that feeling in between where you're just like, all right, what am I? And I tell myself every time that I'm like, all right, well, enjoy it because something's going to come around, but you just can't, your mind just can't get to the point that something will come eventually. And you're just worried, worried, worried. And then when you do finally book that next gig, you're like, oh, I should have spent more time doing the things I wanted to do.
Exactly. God, it's like my entire life.
Oh. Yeah, yeah. So how do you wind up going to at one point you then go to Chicago and you start up the Steve Harvey Show in Chicago, which becomes a huge hit, Emmy winning show, really, really an awesome show. How did that come about? How did you wind up over there?
Um, I had done, so we finished Nate, and then Sony did the Queen Latifah pilot 2.0, if you will.
Oh,
So I
right, right. Second
went
version.
and did that, and then Linda Fennell and Kim Clyde, who were the executives that oversaw Megan's talk show,
That's right.
were still at NBC, obviously, and they were overseeing this. So they introduced me to Alex Duda, who was the EP showrunner, and I had some great meetings with her and went out to Chicago, and we hit it off, and she hired me. And then she had history with Kevin because they had worked together at Eliminate. So she hired, because I was
Oh,
like,
wow.
oh, how am I going to go to Chicago without Kevin? And he had just finished another season, like the 15th season of The Bachelor. And she was like, well, we need a soup and blah, blah, blah. So we ended up both getting hired. And then we were like, all right, I guess we're going to Chicago because we always just kind of went wherever the work was. Like, because we
Sure.
were like, all
Right.
right, this is our next paycheck. This is what we
Yeah.
have to do
And
right now.
and that's a question I have for you, and I know the answer, but for people listening, how important is it for an up and coming producer or just a producer in general to be flexible, be bi-coastal, be able to follow where the work is? Because I feel like I've gotten some of my best jobs because I've been flexible and able to move around a lot. Do you find that in your career as well, that you have to be
Yes, but I
mobile?
think that what you begin to realize is that you sacrifice a lot of your personal life when you start doing that.
Hmm.
And that's what we realized. I mean, Chicago was good because it was, we're both from New York, so it was close enough. But his sisters at the time were in LA. So it got to the point where you have to start making better decisions for your personal life and not your professional life. Because we were
Right.
so
Right.
flexible for so long. But
Well,
there's sacrifices. You miss out
yeah,
on
and
a
I think
lot when
it's
you're
easier
bouncing
when you're
around.
younger. Yeah, I think it's easier when you're younger and, you're eager to, grow in your career. Once you get to a certain stage though, you're right. You have to plant roots and, you can't be jumping around all the time. But
Yeah.
definitely I would
And
say to
living
an
in
up and coming
fear.
producer. Yeah, and living right, right. But definitely for an
which
up
is
and coming
hard to
producer, I
shake.
would say be flexible. You
I
know,
agree. I would agree with that, especially in the early years. Like,
right, right.
but
And
be
then
careful with it because you don't want to be too flexible. And then before you know
true,
it,
true.
you're in your 30s
Yeah,
and
your
you're
life
like,
has
we're
passed
living in
by, and you're
Chicago.
yeah.
Yeah, it's 4 degrees outside. What do we
I
do with our
love
lives?
Chicago, man. I
You were
love
there for a
Chicago.
year.
I know you. You know, no, but here's the thing: the year, and let me say this because I do want to let you know that, or I'd let the audience know. Jason brought me to Chicago for the Steve Harvey Show, and I couldn't be more thankful for that. We talk about these periods of time where you go from one show to the next, and there's that in between and the pit in your stomach. I was in one of those moments where I was here in LA. I had left. I forgot what show I was working on, but I was in one of those moments where I was like, "What am I going to do? The health insurance is gone, money savings is running out." And then one day I get a call from Jason, and he's like, "What are you doing? Would you ever consider coming to Chicago?" And I'm like, "What?" And he explains to me, he's working on the Steve Harvey Show, and they need somebody out there. And it really saved me, man. It really saved me at the time because I was in a place where I was really not enjoying LA anymore. I wasn't enjoying the business. I was kind of doubting whether I wanted to work in this business. And you kind of you infused new life in me and my love for this business, and it wound up being a really great experience for me and for my family. And that's, I guess, why I say I love Chicago so much, because it was something I really needed at that time. And it was just a great change from where my life was going at that time. So I thank you for that, because it was an amazing experience for me.
Oh, that's nice for you to say.
Yeah.
It was a good fit. It made sense. And then I
Yeah.
left.
And then, yeah, and then I get there. We get to hang out for a little while. We kind of reinvigorate our friendship, and we're having fun. And then you're like, I'm leaving. I'm like, wait, where are you going?
Going back
Like,
to New York.
yeah, what are you doing? But let's talk about when you started up the show, Steve Harvey Show, because it became a huge success. Can you talk about that process a little bit, about moving to Chicago, a new place, meeting Steve, and then what was the process to create that show and make it the success that it was?
I think for Alex and I, the challenge obviously was, kind of going back to what we were saying earlier, what was Steve's point of view? What were his strengths? He obviously had a radio show, so we pulled a lot from that. He had his books, we pulled a lot of that. And it was clear that relationship conflict resolution was the way to go. So it was just, once we, quickly realized that, it's how do we then build that into an actual television show, 7 segments or 6 segments, because you can go either way. Um, and one of the things that I like to do is figure out that structure. So not
Hmm.
so like I need the structure and the plan in order to then be creative. So we sort of figured out what the show would look like as a format. So it was an A story that was segment 1 and 2. And then we would do a segment 3, which I think we were calling it like the palate cleanser, which was something like different in topic, quicker, fun, lighter. And then we would do, I think, 3, 4. That was 1, 2, 3, and then 4, 5 was a B story, which is different than the A story. And then we would figure out how to close the show out in 6 and 7. So that was sort of the loose structure that we started with. And then Alex and I worked really well together to figure out like what's the A story, what's the B story, and then what are the pieces in between. And that's when we sort of came up with like Ask Steve. So then once we realized, oh, Ask Steve is sort of the signature, that became segment 1. Then the A story became 2 and 3. Then 4 became the palate cleanser. Then 5, 6 became the B story. And then 7 became Just One More Thing. And then we were like, bam, that's our structure.
Yeah.
So that's
Because
sort of
once you
how it
see
came.
what
And
works, yeah, once you start to see what works with the host, then you can kind of play with the segments and figure out the structure of the show.
yeah, and Alex was someone that I learned from because her experience was so different. And she had, I think a lot of the stuff I had done was celebrity driven, and she had done so much more reality and real people and resolution, in a different space. So I learned a lot, like what she brought to the table, which was so much, obviously, as a showrunner,
Right. Alex,
content
she had
wise.
come from Tyra. She was doing the Tyra Banks show.
But she did
The
so much. I
first,
think Tyra was only a couple of years. I mean, she did
yeah,
Eliminate, and like she created shows. Like she had
right,
a lot
yeah,
happening and a lot to learn from.
right. And now she's the EP of the Kelly Clarkson show. So yeah, definitely, it looks like you worked well together because you both brought different strengths to the executive level and the shaping the show.
And the staff was
Um,
amazing. I mean,
the staff was
considering
great.
we were in Chicago, because we didn't know,
Yeah,
that was like one of the biggest unknowns for us. We were like, who's going to move here? Who's like who exists here that could work well? And thankfully, we got a lot of amazing producers from the court world, because that was like the big
right.
shows that were out there, and Mathis and stuff, and so that was nice.
Yeah, it's funny because there's not a lot of shows that are produced in Chicago, like talk show type shows that are produced there.
I think
So
Oprah ending
Oprah was
when we
gone by that
started.
time. Well, I don't know when you guys started. When I got there, Oprah was gone already. They had demolished the Harpo building.
Oh
I think, or
wow.
maybe they were demolishing it when I was that year that I was there.
Yeah.
But it was funny
Yeah, I think
because
pretty sure.
when I was walking down the hallway with G, my wife, and all of a sudden, like this entourage comes around the corner, and they're like, the security's like, back up, move against the wall. I'm like, whoa, what's going on? Is the president here? And Judge Mathis comes walking out, and I'm just like, what? Like he's like a superstar here in Chicago.
He really was. And they like ran that building because they had been
Oh
there for
yeah,
like 155 years. So we were like the new kids on the block.
right.
And I
Oh man.
remember we had like First Lady Michelle Obama coming on. And it was like we had to ask their permission to use like the nice dressing room that they
Oh
always
my.
used. And they were like, I don't know. And they're like, we're like, it's the first lady. Like, give us the dressing room. And the same thing with Mariah. When Mariah Carey was on, it was like we had to beg to use the dressing room. It was like, this is
Yeah.
insane.
No, he was
But they
definitely
had
he was
earned
king
it.
of the building.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
that's
now he
great.
has a reality show about his family, which I haven't seen, but I'm sure
Oh,
it's
that's
very
right.
entertaining.
That's right. Oh, wow. Man, well, you have had a storied career, my friend. And then, yeah, and then, like you said, I mean, you left, you went on to do so many great things. You were the EP of the Harry Connick Jr. show. And then you eventually go to Drew Barrymore. Like we said, you're doing amazing things with that show. I'm in
Thank
all of
you. I'm
you.
very proud of it.
Oh, well, look, I mean, you deserve it. And I'm so happy for you. And thank you for taking the time and sharing your story with me today. You're just a great guy, Jason, and I'm really glad we're friends. And good luck with everything you guys do. I'll be watching, and we'll talk soon.